This second video, where I'm gonna touch on dissolved air flotation, or DAF, is actually based on some work that a very good friend of mine did, Mr. Bengt Jonsson, when looking on how to optimize a flotation unit for a drinking water production plant. But we'll get to that very shortly. So let's have a look at the flotation unit. We go to the inlet, and the surface load, I have written that down here, is normally above 10 meters per hour to a flotation unit, but we'll get back to that. So the incoming water is first mixed with the flocculants, and the mixing should take about 5 to 10 seconds. And when you mix the flocculants, it's very important that they are spread out in the whole water volume in order to be effective. And after you have mixed, you come to the formation of flocks, and that is in another chamber where you have slow stirring for about 5 to 20 minutes, depending on the type of water you want to treat. Then that water goes into the, how should I say, the dispersion chamber. And in the dispersion chamber, the now formed flocks, fluffy flocks, will meet a dispersion water. And that contains about 50% of treated water and 50% of compressed air. And the saturation pressure is at 6 bar. And the water you feed to this pressure vessel is about 10% of the total flow to the flotation unit. With that, let's go to the next in more detail slide. A very principal standard setup of a flotation unit will look something like this. You have the incoming water, which now carries the fluffy flocks that you want to remove. The fluffy flocks goes into the dispersion chamber, meets the dispersion water, and now when this water pressurized air is released, it produces very, very fine bubble that adheres to the flocks, lift them to the surface. And on the surface of the flotation tank or flotation unit, you get a blanket, which kind of a mushy type of sludge sediment with the flocks. And that blanket is what you remove from your water stream. That is your sludge. And just beneath that blanket, you see a dispersion phase, which is kind of a milky, which is kind of a mixture of flocks, dispersion water. And then you have below these layers the clear water, which is your treated water that you take out in the bottom of the flotation unit. Now, this is a standard setup, and there are many good suppliers globally of flotation unit, turnkey plans for flotation. But always remember that it's your particular water that in the end will decide on how a treatment unit will work. So my suggestion is always to start with a small lab scale or a pilot plant before you decide on investing in a full-scale plant. But that is my suggestion based on my experience. So with that, let's look at a development of the flotation unit as actually done by my good friend and colleague, Mr. Bengt Jonsson. Bengt and I used to work as consultants in drinking water production. And in one of Bengt's projects, he looked into how to optimize a flotation for a waterwork that was using a surface water. So let's have a look at this sketch and what Bengt found. If you remember the previous slide, when the flocks entered the dispersion chamber, this wall here was tilted. Also, the dispersion water was introduced in the bottom of the tank, at the bottom of the wall. Now, with the modeling and tests Bengt did, he could see that it was possible to raise this wall and also to move the introduction of the dispersion water from bottom to as shown on this sketch. Also, one of the things Bengt did in the full-scale plant was to remove the mechanical scrapers to get the sludge blanket off. He instead introduced a valve that when the sludge blanket should be removed, the valve was closed and the water level, of course, started to rise, and by that the sludge blanket was removed, and then the valve opened and operation continued as normal. The plant, when this was implemented, it was possible to increase the loading with 20%, which is quite good. So we have looked at the standard solution and we have looked at a development of the flotation process. With that, let's go to the last slide. Since it's summer, I wanted to take the opportunity to end this video with some pictures I've taken. For the record, I do not play golf, or I used to play golf, but not anymore, and I don't have a boat. But enjoy the pictures and see you in the next video. Take good care. Bye bye.